Here's my old friend. I've come to talk with you again, because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence. In restless dreams I walked alone, narrow streets of cobblestone, 'neath the halo of a street lamp. I turned my
Hey guys, Reagan with TDA again. I've brought this pistol into a few videos, talked about it for a second, and it's done some 1911 videos and that sort of thing, but I have been asked about this pistol quite a bit, and specifically after one of the last ones I posted, someone asked me to do a video on it, and this is like the pistol that I've spent the absolute most amount of time with. And so, of course, I'm going to do that. So, flashback to about 2014 when I picked this up. The reason I decided to go with the Springfield Armory TRP Operator was because I had saved up some money, started to become successful as an instructor, got to do some work with Eric Dorenbush of Green Eye Tactical, and his background is Delta, right? And so, at a time when he was in the unit and in OTC, they were still using 1911s. And I messaged him and I was like, hey brother, I'm gonna get me a good 1911, so what do you think, what is your experience with some really high-end names came out of my mouth and that sort of thing. And but I was like, hey, what specifically would you be looking for? And that guy responded, get yourself a Springfield Armory TRP Operator, and sent the message, and then right afterwards, you will not be disappointed with that pistol. And I've said it before, if you know Eric, he's not sponsored by anyone, and if he tells you that a piece of gear is good with that kind of enthusiasm, it's probably great. So I was like, all right, cool. Got on Gunbroker, found this guy, some dude had fired like 50 rounds through it. I think he took his LTC course with it, realized it wasn't for him, and had it up there, and I got it for a song, significantly less than they're going for in the stores and now. So super happy to get it. The second I got it, I'd done some research before, and I heard oftentimes you need to run 2,000 rounds through this gun before you trust, or through a 1911, not this one specifically, through a 1911 before you'll trust it. And so as soon as I got it in, first thing I did was order myself 2,000 rounds of 45 ACP. I'm like, all right, I'm not going to teach with this. I'm not going to do anything with it until I get those 2,000 rounds with it, through it. And it did not need it. This gun came very well fitted from the factory. There were only certain dudes allowed to work on them, and this is a model of the FBI gun. I do actually have one of the FBI guns, or the Springfield Professional, that was the same thing, except it doesn't say FBI. That's the way I like to say that. But they modeled this after that with a few other features. And so I got it. I don't want to go too far into the features. Those are available everywhere. You can figure that out. But one of the things I absolutely was like, I gotta have is this front strap checkering. It's very aggressive, and Daddy likes it rough is just the way I like to say it, man. It will not move in your hand. I put extra rough grips on it, and it is nice and rough, and it will stay in your hands, especially if you're shooting gloves or with gloves or anything like that. It's beautiful. Man, after I got my 2,000 rounds through it and shot the bejesus out of it, I'm like, man, this thing's good to go. I began to teach with it, and so then started the real round count where I'm like starting to accumulate rounds through it. And fast forward to about 3 or 4 years ago, I finally started having some trouble with it. When I say trouble, like I break things. You know, I shoot it a lot. I carry this gun. I didn't carry it for the first few years, and then at some point I decided, yeah, I'm going to carry it. And so I shot the absolute bejesus out of it, and then I started like, all right, I need to keep better round count, and then eventually I started breaking stuff. The safety was one of the first things to break, and it's honestly, I could have repaired it to the way the little claw that holds the ambient safety together actually began to open up. Instead of just taking something and squeezing that back down, I had the safety replaced by Paladin arms over in Longview. Matt fitted me a new one on here, and because I run the safety so hard, I'm very, very adamant on how to use the safety on this gun. I run it significantly more than most folks. He got me the EGW that has a second bar all the way through it, holding it together so that I don't break it. So initially I wasn't crazy about how wide this is. They usually come with like more of a Wilson Combat safety that's a lot more narrow. But after shooting it a little bit, I was like, man, actually, I like that. It's a big, giant gas pedal for me to have my thumb on top of while I shoot. And so I've left that on there. I've not had any issues with it since then. And then, right around, I thought with 50,000 rounds, I broke the extractor. I'd fire a round, wouldn't pull the old shell out, and it would try and load a round right behind it. And I was like, oh, okay. And I looked, and yes, the end of the extractor is gone somewhere, never to be found again. And so I took it to him, and the second I handed it to him, like, yeah, I think I'm closer to the 50,000 round mark. And he locks the slide to the rear, takes a look in it. He's like, oh no, that's more than that. And the ejector, it had a whole bunch of butt whooping done to it. And so, yeah, so I went ahead and had him swap out the ejector and the extractor, put me new ones of those in. And so I've had that done to it. And so when I actually started like, well, I shoot this much, I got around to where I'm like, oh, actually I'm closer to 70 or 75,000 rounds through it when the extractor came out. And I'll tell you, I didn't even swap the recoil spring for the first at least 30,000 rounds, which people tell you, oh, after 1,000, I've had people tell me at 1,000 rounds they changed the recoil spring, and I ran that thing way too far without changing it out. Gun ran great. The only time I really started experiencing any issues was the extractor began to have a ghost. It had a crack in it or something, and every now and then I get a failure to extract. I'm like, oh, that's really weird. It turns out the extractor was broken. So, and it still chugged along for quite a while. So then at some point I ended up stripping out one of these bushings as I took the grips off, because when I do a deep clean on this, or a detail strip, when I take everything off, I'll pull these grips off, and tends to be because I carry this and this side rides against my body, my sweat gets down in there and it will begin to corrode the gun. So I've scraped the rust off of it and then continued on and slapped it full of grease and then threw it back on. I do have a video out of how I grease this gun. It freaks people out, but it absolutely works. So one of the things I've gotten from a lot of people, and I'll be nice, they're wrong, is that 1911s are not reliable. This one's been incredibly reliable. One of the first things I'll tell you though is I grease it really hard. I don't clean it very often. If I clean the gun and it's got less than like 2,000 rounds through it, it's probably because I've dropped it into something, or it's been rubbed in the dirt from being on the ground or doing something like that in a rifle class or a vehicle tactics class or something to that effect, and I'll detail strip it for that particular reason. Most of the time, if it has any issues, all I do is add more grease and oil to it. It will run all day long dirty. It doesn't like to run dry. So, yeah, there's plenty of other videos out there showing that the 1911 platform is actually quite reliable, including Garand Thumb, and Texas Plinking did a very good one on like a GI model versus a Glock 19, and it actually did well, better than the 19 pretty easily. But you can look that up, make your own deductions. One of my favorite stories of this particular gun is at Shooter Symposium, probably in 2019 or earlier than that, it might have been. I ended up getting forced into a Dan Broco's course. When I say forced, I was supposed to take something else. Other instructor had to leave, so I trained with Dan Broco's for a night. And it was vehicle tactics. The easiest way to say it is it was vehicle tactics, and it had rained super hard earlier in that day. And underneath the vehicles, we had a solid like 5-6 inches of mud. And he likes to teach flat face prone, where you're jamming the magazine into the deck and rotating the gun into position. You can see through the sights and shoot by using the ground. And so everybody was getting tons and tons of mud up all around their guns. And I believe I was the only one running a 1911 there in that particular class. And we had 2 HK USP 45s, and both of them locked up so hard that we could not get them open. It was pretty incredible that much mud was inside of them. The only malfunction I had out of my TRP operator here was as I went to grab another magazine, it rubbed against something and put a glop of mud on the front of the first round. And so as I jammed it in there and sent the slide home, it was a failure to go into battery because there was just mud inside of the barrel and on the end of that round, and it wouldn't go. Did myself a quick tap rack. It was dark outside at this point, so it came flying out, went somewhere, never saw it again. Slide went back home on the next one, and I went right back to it. And we had several Glock 19s, Glock 17s. Here, I wasn't sitting there watching the guys to see if it was like going their way or not, but I constantly kept hearing people having to clear malfunctions in and around those vehicles because your hands are touching the mud and the dirt on the vehicles. There's chunks of mud all over the vehicles, and I still probably have a couple of photos of this thing the next morning when it had already dried and started falling off. The thing was covered in mud. But right at about midnight o'clock that night, we were taking a little break before our last iteration, and Dan Brokos came up and sat with me on my Jeep for a second. He was like, "Hey man, how'd that 1911 run?" And I was like, "Man, it did fantastic. I had one failure to go into battery because of the mud on the end of the round." I was like, "Man, that's cool, that's cool." Of course, every time I go to Symposium now, I got to train with Brokos, so because he complimented my 1911. I think he started calling me Longmire this year or something because I don't get the reference because I don't watch TV. It's a joke. But anyway, so one of my favorite stories about this particular gun. So lo and about now, I started kind of paying attention a little bit more at how much I was shooting this gun over the last couple of years, and the round count's hovering around 90 to 95,000 right now through this particular gun. Taking the barrel out and looked down it, cleaned it out, looked down it, is getting pretty close to slick. So I think when I get to 100,000, I'm not going to retire this gun or anything like that. It is capable of being rebuilt, but I may send it over to Springfield, let them put another barrel in it, and maybe go through the thing. It's probably seen better days as far as the way that all the parts look on the inside. But definitely one of my favorite guns, and had it for a long ass time. But yeah, and I carry this thing every day. I started carrying it quite a few years ago, so I sweat on it. I train with it. Anytime I'm teaching a class, the vast majority of the time I'm using this pistol until 45 gets harder to get, and then I'll switch over to 9mm. But yeah, hope this scratches that itch for the TRP operator. Out.